third, setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I am Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart of UM Hoops. It is Wednesday morning, January 20th. Very much a new day. How are you, Dylan?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
Can't complain today. How about yourself?
Can't complain today is a good way of putting it. Yeah. The season is basically just past its midway point, the regular season.
Did you think we'd get this far?
I don't know. That's a good question. I would have probably said 50-50. And sometimes it feels like it's about at a 50-50, but I don't, there's certainly doesn't seem like there's any mass shutdown coming or anything. I think they're going to power through one way or another, good or worse, good or bad.
Yeah, it's sort of a 75% capacity all the time. We're just moving forward. People get left behind, but there's enough else going on that you just forget about it. And Villanova's playing again. They haven't played since before Christmas. Well, all right. How about that?
I'll tell you this much. If you had told me then that there would only be 11 programs not playing right now, that I would not have believed. But that's where we're at. I think it's, the 8 Ivies aren't playing, and then Bethune-Cookman opted out.
Oh, you mean at all?
At all. Yeah. So the 8 Ivies, you got Maryland Eastern Shore, Bethune-Cookman, and then Chicago State canceled its season a little while ago. I would have thought by now you would have seen a lot of low majors, some mid majors, just kind of bag it. But everyone's going through.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where some of the low majors and mid majors, if they decide to go forward, I don't really know they have the testing capacity to really find out when to shut it down. So they just kind of keep pushing forward, and then they're just kind of at an equilibrium state where there's just different requirements and everything else at some of those levels. So the decision was up front, and now it's, it might as well keep going. Right. Why are you going to play if you're not going to try to finish the season at this point, right?
Exactly. And it's interesting now, when it kind of gets into your own backyard and you kind of see it unfolding at Michigan State right now. We're going to get into last night's Michigan-Maryland game a lot and talk about where Michigan is after that loss over the weekend. And then on the back end of the show, we're going to do another power ranking.
Oh, yeah.
Which would give the people what they want, to quote Dylan Burkhart. But up top, we do want to touch on Michigan State and kind of the status of that season. Because, like I was saying, it's when it kind of comes, close to home, whatever, and you can kind of see how not a shutdown, that's not the terminology they're using, but when you can see how an outbreak can just completely derail a program, it is pretty jarring to see. And you talk to people up there and, they're going through some individual workouts right now, like Tom Izzo and a GA are working out small groups and individuals right now. They're not even letting assistant coaches in the gym because among Dane Fife, DJ Stevens, and Mike Garland, none of them have contracted corona yet. So, playing it safe, there's no reason to bring those guys in if they don't need to be on hand. You're talking about a Big Ten program operating on January 20th this way. It's wild.
Yeah, and we're starting to see it pick up kind of across the league, right? We see Nebraska, we see Penn State earlier, and it's a really interesting situation to navigate now where there's only 2 months left in the season, and all of a sudden the number of postponed games is starting to get longer and longer, and you're going to have to fit those games in. And we can talk all about collapsible buys and everything else, but the first collapsible buy is in the next week, and there's going to be a lot of games that you need to figure out in February and March. So that's going to really affect Michigan State, how many games have they already dropped or have to make up right now? 3. So how do you see that playing out as we kind of dive?
Yeah, I don't know, because technically, they have these built-in buy windows. Well, this week is one of them for Michigan State.
Forever.
So
the whole idea is everyone's week is the same.
So, they're not playing right now. So you're not able to make up any games in this window. They have one more kind of bye week in the leading into the last week of the year, right? That's where everyone has it. Well, if you have 3 games to make up, right? Let's play the odds. 3 programs right now have been seriously affected by COVID-19. Like you mentioned, Nebraska, Penn State, Michigan State. Judging on what we're seeing across the board in college basketball, there will be further programs in the Big Ten to have similar experiences here in the next 4 to 6 or 7 weeks. So if other programs start getting shut down and you already have 3 games to make up, and in theory, some of the teams that you need to make up could be shut down. Some of the teams that you're going to have on your regular schedule are going to shut down. Like, I think in the immediate future, the greater likelihood is for Michigan State to add more games that it needs to make up, not be able to actually make up games, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
we don't know when they'll even, there's not a set date where everything will be good and they can keep playing even, right?
Right. So, there's a potential of adding more postponements or being unable to reschedule games or Michigan State also having its own prolonged struggles here, right? Like, they still need to get back on the court at some point. As of now, they're not playing until next week? Their next
the 28th
game is the 28th at Rutgers. It's the 20th today. And they're going to need a free and clear slate to be able to go and play that. So, yeah, I don't think they're getting to 20 games. I don't think a lot of teams are getting to 20 games. And it's going to be messy. So, I don't know what that means for its NCAA tournament resume. I don't know what that means for, its place in the league standings going into whatever version of a Big Ten tournament that there may or may not be. Who knows, man? It's total guesswork.
So I have some questions, and I'm just curious your thoughts. So you know how the league works and whatever else. I mean, the goal of I just think the different motivations or incentives for everyone involved in this whole thing is fascinating, because you're going to have to start figuring out how to reschedule games. You're going to have to figure out what you want to do with the postseason tournament. And what's the end goal for the Big Ten? Probably to get the most teams in the NCAA tournament, right?
Yes. And
we don't know. There's been no official release that explains how the regular season champion will be crowned, as far as I know. So I have questions on that. I also have questions. When you're making up games, do you go outside of the originally constructed schedule to maybe get a game that can help a team get in the NCAA tournament? Does everyone just play Nebraska 4 times? Do you we have these set schedules of, you're playing these teams once, and we can say, Michigan has an easy schedule. Well, do you just throw another Michigan-Iowa game in the mix if it's late in the season? And do people scream bloody murder if that costs your team a regular season championship? I have so many questions about how this works out, and that's before we even get to the Big Ten tournament, where why exactly are we playing a Big Ten tournament?
Yes.
And there's a risk of getting COVID-19 and then your NCAA tournament is over. What are we doing?
Right. No, if anything, it feels like these programs should go full lockdown quarantine that week.
Forfeit the last week of the season in quarantine. That's what you're playing for. So I know there's been talk about moving it to Indianapolis, and I don't know if they're going to try to claim it's part of that bubble or something else to make it more. Obviously, the Big Ten wants to play the tournament because it makes them a lot of TV money, but
yes,
if you're a team, the one thing that can ruin your season at that point is COVID-19. And going to a site where every Big Ten team is at that point, it's just, I don't know. It's going to get really weird because a lot of this stuff isn't really set in stone. They're making the rules and the changes up on the fly, and everyone wants different things.
Right. And and part of this is, I don't care how smart the people are in the room or what intentions that they have. These are impossible decisions too. There is no clean, easy, obvious answers in any of this. And whatever they decide, people are going to complain. And whatever they come up with, especially for the regular season stuff, how they're going to figure out how to play games, when to play games, which teams get what matchups, right? Like you said, it can just parade Nebraska around to all your bubble teams and just try to load up their schedules. I don't know, because I also feel like any plan that they come up with right now, in a lot of ways, is still going to be subject to change.
Exactly.
Right?
And that they clearly learned that from the football season, where they released this whole set of rules, and then they're like, well, shit, this isn't what we want. And they changed.
Exactly.
And the merits of that change made complete sense. There was really no argument that Ohio State shouldn't go to the Big Ten championship game based on what had happened on the field that season, from my very uneducated football point of view. But what I'm saying is, it seems like their hope is, we'll just make the obvious call when it happens. But it's just, what if it becomes like a non-obvious call? I guess is the big question.
Yeah, for sure. Like, what if there's a million different scenarios you can come up with? What if, let's say Michigan wins a couple games here, then gets blasted with a bad rash of it, right? And for some reason they end their regular season 11-1 in the league, right? But
never play Iowa, and Iowa goes 15-4 or something. Right.
Iowa plays nearly a full slate, gets to 15-4, whatever it might be, right? In that scenario, can you really just say, oh, you should just go with winning percentage? Right. Like I've seen people say that. So they're just going to go with winning percentage for the league standings. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that sounds simple. Once you see those final standings, though, you might not feel that way. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, in that case, there's no obvious answer either, right? Like you can say, Iowa lost 3 more games, but Iowa played a whole extra handful of games. So I don't know. It's going to be messy, however they figure it out. And the Big Ten tournament question, just like no one's talking about it right now, but it's going to become a thing, I'm pretty sure. And the other thing, let the bubble teams in, and then whoever wins it gets your auto bid, right? Like, who's stopping you from doing that? Like, do you just have the teams that are already in the tournament opt out? I don't know. Does that ruin the integrity of the whole thing? Yes. Yeah.
And would the league be okay with teams just saying we're not playing in it? I don't know. I don't know. If Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin are all just come out and are just like, yeah, we're not playing in the Big Ten tournament because we only care about the NCAA. What's the message? What's the response going to be from the league office in that scenario? I have no idea. I don't think it'd be overly positive.
I think they'd have to call the tournament.
Right.
And the other question is going to be, there's going to be games that are still not made up. So is there a way that you can like lump all that together, right? Can you, like, there's going to be, if everyone's not at 20 games, can you get some of those games? And I just don't know. It's just fascinating because it's going to be so messy to sort these teams out to begin with the parity in the league. And then the unbalanced schedules are going to be extreme. I mean, what if Nebraska's season just gets shut down? Anyone that got their games in against Nebraska has a huge advantage in the standings and whatever else.
Yeah, and if there's any scenario where if you added an extra week to a regular season, you could actually like get every team to 20 games and have a full conference slate, isn't that vastly more valuable than shoehorning some version of a conference tournament into the end of what is a bizarre season? Like, use that week to make up a couple games, maybe.
But is it more valuable? Like, would the Big Ten think that's a more valuable asset? I don't really think so.
Not in terms of its TV contract, but in terms of like the integrity of a regular season, whatever the hell that means.
So what's higher on the Big Ten priority list? TV money or integrity of a regular season?
Sure, of course. I'm just saying from my perspective, like what I would prefer to see, because at the end of the day, it's an unnecessary risk, whether you're in Chicago or Indianapolis, or you went to one of these campus sites. I don't know if the motivations, if they go through with a tournament, the motivations are abundantly clear.
Yeah. And so the rule for the NCAA tournament is each league can basically pick who their auto bid is. They don't have,
yeah, I mean, you can just pick your regular season champion and give your auto bid to that team, which I feel like
these low major leagues
majors
have to
should
do that.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I just can't see it really going well if everyone tries to play conference tournaments, but also those conference tournaments are basically the moment in time for every low major, mid-major league, right? That's the biggest event of the year. So
And they have their own TV contracts.
Exactly. So that's going to be, I mean, the conference tournaments were where this whole thing went to shit a year ago, and it's going to be really interesting how that all works out. I don't know. We have something to look forward to in 2 months.
I mean, that's the thing. These leagues that are still going through all of this to play, like, you can make a very real case that they're just trying to get to their conference tournament, not to the NCAA tournament. You know, that kind of goes back to, if the motivation of playing the season was just to try to get any nickels out of it that you can because of the circumstances, like, yeah, hell yeah, you're going to play your league tournament. Like, that's one of those things that I was thinking when I said the low majors and mid majors would have opted out by now. I thought you were going to see a lot of teams just play their bye game slate and then bag. You know?
Yeah. But here we are.
Here we are.
January 20th, and we're still playing basketball.
So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Michigan State. When they do come back.
Go ahead.
When they do come back, I'll be really curious to kind of see what they look like, right? Is this a good reset? Is this a bad reset? Are they completely discombobulated? Who knows? I mean, that's total guesswork.
Yeah, and Maddie Sissoko and Josh Langford will be out for like the first couple games because they tested positive. Is that correct? I think it's 17 days now.
I think that's right, yes. Which means, Rocket will slide back into the starting lineup, and they'll have a little less depth on the front line. I put depth in air quotes.
Free Gabe Brown movement is big opportunity.
There you go. That's right. Hashtag it.
We'll get more into Michigan State when we know when they're actually going to play another game. Michigan has played 2 games since we last recorded, so probably a little bit to pick apart there before we go into the power rankings. What was your where
much
you
anticipated power rankings?
Yeah, everyone wants to know where you're going to rank some of these teams. You've made quite the little stir. Where are you at after Michigan? I think they played probably pretty easily their worst game of the year on Saturday. Bounced back last night with a easy win over a Maryland team that every time I watch them play, I'm just mystified how they beat Wisconsin and Illinois on the road. What's your thoughts?
I didn't put too much weight on that Minnesota loss. A loss was coming, and it makes sense that it would come the day that you're without Eli Brooks. I thought I was impressed by Minnesota. I thought they were really ready to play. But, losing Eli is not he would have scored 25 points, so it's a 25-point swing. It's not that at all. It's what he would have done for ball movement on the offensive end. It's what he would have done for defense by being able to check Marcus Carr better than any option Michigan had. Would Michigan have won that game with Eli? I have no idea. Would it have been what we saw on Saturday? No. So, a loss is a loss. I don't think they played well. I don't think they responded well to not having, to being a little uncomfortable, I should say. But I just kind of chalked it up as a loss. Last night against Maryland, impressive. You go and it's the same thing that we've talked about a number of times, right? Maryland tried to kind of pick its poison and say, okay, hard doubles on Dickinson, and that plan fell apart in rapid succession. And the thing about Michigan is that I think we're going to talk more and more about as the games get more and more important is like Michigan as a front runner in some of these games. Like they're going to be hard. Like if they go out and get a lead on teams, they're going to be hard to come back on. Just that the offense can really score the ball. They just dusted another team. I don't really know what else there is to. You make that many threes, and you just completely blow up a team's plan. You're going to win by whatever it was, 24.
Michigan made their first 5 threes, and Maryland missed a bunch of their early threes, and the game was just kind of over from that point. It's just like if Mike Smith's
Maryland's not good.
If Mike Smith's going to come out and hit 3 threes in the first segment of the game, you're basically like, what do? You just have to say, well, shit, that's not really going to get it done.
And then Brandon Johns comes in and he bangs one, and then if you're Turgeon, you just throw your hands up and say, let's just get the hell out of here without anyone getting injured.
Yeah, there's good symmetry in the fact that Michigan's offense scored 1.25 points per possession at Maryland, where they just went inside to Dickinson every play and he scored, and they scored 1.25 points per possession in this game when he just passed it back out and they rotated the ball and hit a bunch of threes. I honestly think I don't think Michigan played that well in this game. I think it's one, like people think you're crazy when like Michigan will barely win a game because they missed all their threes, but actually ran good stuff and got a bunch of easy twos and played great defense. This is sort of the opposite for me, where I felt, and part of it was probably just a product of the talent gap and the difference, but it was Michigan made so many threes that I don't think they really executed at the level we've maybe seen in some of these other games. They didn't. I thought the defense left kind of a little bit to be desired, and honestly, Michigan got a bit lucky as far as Maryland got a lot of open threes, and Donta Scott's shooting like 50% from three on the year. He just misses a bunch. Like some of those go early in the first half. You're in a different game entirely. So I thought there's probably going to be more that you'll go back. It almost felt like a bye game where you win by 20, but you don't like, it's not like this is the best Michigan's played or anything like that, but it's also really nice to be able to go and win by 24 points when you play maybe an average game. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, where Maryland just has no hope of guarding Michigan in man-to-man. And that's just what we saw. And it could have been another way, and it just ended up this way because of how the game played out. I think
the size difference was stark.
Yeah, and it's funny because Maryland's one of the biggest teams in the country by average height because their guards are also big. Right. But their guards are just not very good, and their bigs are just terrible. So it's just not a good combination. And they want to go with the two smalls. I honestly think they need to just go all in on that because Galen Smith is just not a Big Ten player, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I think the best chance they have is to just spread Hamilton and Donta Scott out and shoot a bunch of threes. But in a game like this, they miss them, and then where are you at? So that's my take on this game. I think everyone's talking about the double teams. I thought Michigan had a much better plan. Like in the first game at Minnesota, when Hunter Dickinson struggled, he was really trying to force the ball he would get the ball and there would be a cut into the lane and he would try to force that pass. And that was actually really effective. I think it was at Nebraska. They did that a lot where they would hit Livers kind of on that cut and then he would kick it out or get downhill. Minnesota completely took that away. They flipped that against Maryland, and it was just make the simple pass, just one pass away, and then rotate the ball, and it's going to be a wide open three or an easy drive and dunk or foul. So that was great prep. Dickinson was a lot more poised in the post, so to speak, when he caught the ball. He didn't rush the pass. He realized these guys aren't going to do anything to affect me. I can take a second and I can pass it. So I think there's a lot to like, but I also think it wasn't like this is the best this team has played by any stretch.
Yeah. So two things. First, on the double thing, I also felt like it kind of showed, the difference in how personnel works when you're going to try to double Michigan. Like if you don't have the size and Dickinson's able to throw the ball just over people, like, yes, a lot of times he did make the simple pass, but he also made a few where he threw it to the opposite side of the court and stuff like that. And those passes just didn't work against Minnesota when you had a 7-footer on his back and you even had length on the other side of the court, right? Like Minnesota's got these big, long arm guys.
I don't think that's what happened. I think the difference was he didn't throw those passes into the middle of the court. He didn't throw it into the defense. I really think it was making the right pass instead of the length affecting him. And obviously maybe the length speeds him up and forces him to make the wrong pass. But if you go back and watch his turnovers at Minnesota, he's throwing it where the defense is, not where the defense isn't. And that wasn't the case in this game.
I would also say that when he caught the ball and it was 2 6-7 guys, like there were still times where he had 2 guys on him and the ball in his hands, and he had the ball way up over his head and he's looking over the defense and making these passes. Like it just throwing two, like you don't make him uncomfortable just putting two bodies on him. Like you only make him uncomfortable if you're taking out his sight lines.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's also probably the fact of maybe guys realize having greater awareness too of when he's being doubled. Like you need to be active when you're off the ball, right? Like you can't just feel like you're open. Like sometimes you got to maybe take a couple steps here, take a couple steps there. Like just have greater probably spatial awareness. We'll go. It's a basketball term, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably a combination of all those things. But I forget what I put out last night. It was like Dickinson was a plus 22 while scoring 3 points in a game. Like, Michigan can beat you.
Also,
and like that's the thing. If they're making threes, then I don't know what you do.
Yeah. Also, Michigan shot 27% from three at Minnesota. Well, I mean that changes the game too. And I think the quality, like when the ball gets kicked out, when you have Eli on the perimeter, I think there's you have basically one extra pass per possession. I'd say he just moves the ball so well, and there's so much more flow on the perimeter. He gets so many assists where he probably has the most assists without a dribble on the team, where he catches the ball and just makes one more pass and it benefits with the assist. But it's really the play was created by someone else. He gives Michigan that flow in a way that you don't get without him on the court. And that really stands out because you think about how many games you look and you're like, oh, Eli had 5 assists. I barely remember him handling the ball. It's very different than Mike Smith, who will dribble around and drive and kick or any of that. Eli just catches the ball, doesn't know how to shoot, makes the pass, and that's a sign of a great offense. And I think that impact is pretty obvious.
Same goes for Dickinson. I mean, he's got a handful of assists this year. He hasn't had a multi-assist game since Oakland, right? It's not like he's just drilling dudes for open threes, right? He's just the first pass in a series that, the way that their unselfishness, their ability to reverse the ball, and just everyone knows that, like, if you're playing that way, everyone eats, right? Everyone's getting shots on this team, and all that does is just promote sharing the ball more and more and more. Like, they always make the extra pass, and when they get defenses in their rotations, I don't care how good you are. When you have that many shooters out there, you're going to get looks more often than not. So,
and that's
I thought that. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that's why teams don't want to double, because it just basically guarantees that you're going to be in rotation, right? So you're just automatic, like you don't even have to really find it. You know that there's going to be a 4-on-3 situation on the other side of the court if you can just get the ball there. And you're basically like, you play offense to get a 4-on-3 advantage, and they're just giving you one if you have the poise to not rush and not do something dumb with the ball. And that's what Dickinson will learn as he keeps going forward. He did a great, that night and day between what he did at Minnesota and what he did against Maryland.
Yeah. And he never looked uncomfortable at all. I kind of, one thing that I came away from a little bit with this game is that this does kind of show the kind of long-term, like just how good this team is and can continue to be. Like, to your point that they didn't play that well and they scored 87 points and basically ran another Big Ten team out of the gym. And, Mark Turgeon's website, I actually watched it on your site, his press conference after the game, where he's talking about, like, this team can win it all. Like, they've got 3 or 4 pros. They got all these different ways to beat you. You're constantly reacting to what they're doing. And, like, that's real. That is true. I correct me if I'm wrong. So their defense is now top 10 in the country. And is this the first time this year that they're in top 10 offense and defense?
They've been kind of, it's been flux. They've been kind of in that 7 to 12 range in both for a while. I think they've both kind of been going up and down as the winds flow.
Right. But I could be wrong, but it feels like this is the first time that they're both top 10, which, everyone knows, like, that's kind of like the special recipe, right? If you want to project teams in the tournament, things like that, to make Final Four runs, like, you're inside the top 10 in offense and defense. That's a pretty good pick. Like, you would even say inside the top 20 is a good pick. And that's pretty rare. Inside the top 10 is exceedingly rare. And that's where Michigan is right now. Like, people need to understand how good this team is playing in the big picture, because we can nitpick a lot of stuff, but they're really, really good.
Yeah, and their Big Ten schedule hasn't been the toughest, but they have the best defense in the league by almost 5 points per 100 possessions, which you wouldn't. I mean, if you would have told me that before the season started, I would have said you're crazy. Like, I didn't think this team was going to be this good defensively, and they've really exceeded basically anything you could expect from them on that side of the ball, and that gives you a baseline, right? I mean, it gives you a margin for error, and they have enough offensive tools to really benefit off of that. So I agree with that. I guess the two other things we should probably hit on, one, still, I think some of the same rotation issues that we saw in Minnesota. We haven't talked about that in
the
either
lineups.
game.
Let's talk about the lineups.
Yeah. So Juwan Howard has been the last two games going with a look midway through the first half where he plays almost his entire bench at the same time. Last night that was a Zeb Jackson, Eli Brooks, Shawnee Brown, Brandon Johns, Austin Davis lineup. I'm not sure Michigan even has to go that deep. Like, they're playing 9 guys right now, and this was at a point when the game was still competitive. I think they need to make a big effort to stagger some of those minutes, right? Like, if you're going to play 4 guys off the bench, why don't you play more of them with starters, right? Why isn't Franz Wagner with that group? Or why isn't Hunter Dickinson with Zeb Jackson? Or there's just the best case scenario when you play all your bench at the same time is a stalemate for 4 minutes. And in a game games can turn quickly. These aren't like scrimmages, right? I mean, if Maryland makes 3 threes in a row, all of a sudden you're in a 2-point game and everything changes. You might have been dominating. I don't get it. What's weird about it is that Juwan, at points when Austin Davis was out of the mix, would just play starters all the time. And we saw, like, at Maryland, the starters played almost the entire second half. So he kind of seems to fluctuate with how he manages his bench and how much he deploys it. But what he's doing right now isn't working. It was a huge issue at Minnesota. And obviously you can get a bit of an excuse there because Eli's not in the rotation. But what do you make of his rotation management right now?
Yeah, I totally agree with you that you just can't have certain guys out there together, and that, like, the second that they're on the court together, it's kind of shocking that no one on the bench is like, wait, what is this? Someone get one of these guys at least out of there. But I think there's a lot of things at play here. I think it's probably disappointing that, Brandon Johns had a 5-game audition to really cement himself as a small ball 5 and kind of change the rotation. And clearly he did not, in the staff's eyes, in Juwan's eyes, didn't do what it took to validate himself being that primary spot. They went right back to Austin Davis. They went right back to what they rely on. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not saying, that it's the right decision, but that's the decision that's been made.
I would also add that Austin Davis is playing exactly as much as he was playing when he was starting. I mean, Hunter Dickinson dominated for that 5-game stretch, and his playing time is back to where it was in the start of the season when we were saying, why isn't he playing more minutes? You have one of the best big men in the entire country, and then you have Austin Davis. You need to play, like, the fact that Austin Davis played a 4-minute stint and then there was a media timeout and he went back on the court for 2 more minutes. It just doesn't make sense. You have Hunter Dickinson. You need to play him. And Hunter Dickinson struggled a little bit since Davis came back, and I think part of that is he's not quite getting enough minutes and enough time to find himself all the time. So I don't understand that decision, because it's not just – if you want to play Austin Davis over Brandon Johns, that's fine. You see Brandon Johns not pick up his man enough times as a center that you're like, well, right, that's going to drive me crazy. I get that. Right. But why aren't you playing Austin Davis 6 to 10 minutes instead of 10 to 15 minutes? That, like, you're talking about Hunter Dickinson, one of the best offensive players in the country, and Austin Davis just isn't the same impact player by any measure.
Yeah, and I don't get it. I just don't get it. I'm not sure what the real rationale is. It doesn't make sense. So that's kind, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure in Juwan Howard has his reasons, and the staff has its reasons, but that's a hard one. It's a hard one to wrap your head around. And maybe it's just, they feel like they don't need to be playing Hunter Dickinson 35 minutes a game in January. And, but if you're playing Illinois and, your bigger later season games, and this is what it looks like, or if you're in the NCAA tournament and you're still playing Austin Davis, 12 minutes in a game when you have Hunter Dickinson, that's just going to kind of be fairly mind blowing. But
put it this way. If Michigan loses an NCAA tournament game and Hunter Dickinson doesn't play 32 minutes, I mean, he hasn't gotten foul trouble once, but that's just that would be just a massive coaching error. And Juwan Howard's been terrific this year, and Michigan runs probably the best stuff in the half court, but that's a personnel decision that I just can't figure out. He was comfortably playing 32, 33 minutes a game for that stretch when Davis was out. Now he's back 24, 23, 21. I get leaving him on the bench yesterday in the second half when the game was over. That's fine. Rest him. But in the first half, he needs to be playing 16 minutes if you're going to win the Big Ten and be the team that you want to be. Austin Davis last night scored 9 points in 10 minutes. That's almost a point per minute. But Michigan was outscored by 1 point while he was on the court. So that's a best case scenario. What if he doesn't?
Right. And Hunter Dickinson played 21 minutes, scored 3 points, and Michigan outscored Maryland by 22 points.
I don't get
it's
it.
Math, man. I don't. So, yeah, I don't. There's going to be a game where they're going to lose a lead because of the lineups that they're playing. That's going to happen.
The Minnesota game got down to 6 points and then went off the rails when Michigan went to the bench. So it's a tough situation all around, I'd say. Yeah,
I mean, and that's another good example. Is it's not just the Dickinson thing. It's I get that Shawnee Brown motioned to come out in the second half of that game, but at that in the minutes leading up to that, he was the best player on the floor. I mean, he was just playing at another level. And if he motions to go out, if your only option in that instance is to put in Zeb Jackson in a 6-point game where you're trying to make a comeback, call timeout.
It was. It was immediate timeout already too, right? I think so.
I don't
not.
Know. No. That substitution came in flow.
Okay,
it came in the flow. But yeah, just burn a timeout, man. Let him catch a breather and then send it back out there. Do not put. I don't think Zeb Jackson's ready to be. I get wanting to put him out there and just kind of keep him engaged here and there, right? Because come next year, he better be ready. So, yeah, it's probably good not to maroon him on the bench, but there are times and there are places, and that was not one of them.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to hit on Isaiah Livers. I know you wrote about him. We had a little Twitter discussion about him last night.
It was nice. I thought it was good. It didn't turn contentious.
No. So Isaiah... for me, I'm just curious what your thoughts on his game. I know you talked a lot about his kind of expanding game and everything else, which is true, but I'm just curious where you're at with him. I know you wrote about him. What did you think of that performance?
Yeah, my thought on Isaiah coming out of the game was just he's just he just shows up every night. He just does his thing, right? And it's not he's just kind of I saw Isaiah Livers had his 14, 15 points. He made his 3 or 4 threes, whatever. That's just what he does. It's probably taken for granted how just consistent and constant presence that he gives them, right? He plays. It's funny. He's only playing 30 minutes a game, but it's because of all these blowouts. If these games were close, Isaiah Livers would be playing 34, 35 minutes a game. They just don't. They have to rely on him because he's reliable. So, he scored double figures in 25 of his last 33 full games. He's averaging 14 points and 2 made threes in that stretch, shooting almost 42%. It's very easy to overlook what he does because he's not Hunter Dickinson, because he's not Franz Wagner. So that's all I was really writing. And he has expanded his game, in his per 40 stats in his first 3 years were 6 rebounds and 1.2 assists per 40. This year he's at 7.5 rebounds. He's at 3 assists. He's not a facilitator. He's not Nick Stauskas in 2014, but credit where it's due, right? We talked about him being a guy who couldn't dribble. We talked about him being a guy who you would never really imagine playing out of a ball screen, but he has improved, and he's not one dimensional. And in the greater effort that it took this year to replace Xavier Simpson, right? Having a guy like Isaiah Livers make certain improvements in his game, I think really aided kind of the collective effort to be able to have a really high functioning offense when you lose a guy like Xavier.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing I keep thinking back on is early in this year, we were talking about how there wasn't really a give and take or a flow between like Franz Wagner's offensive possessions and Isaiah Livers. I think you have to give a ton of credit for them for figuring it out, but also for Juwan Howard and kind of what they're running and when they run it, but also Mike Smith. Like, he keeps everyone involved, and I think that he's developed into such a good pick and roll passer has really enabled two guys who their whole career have played off of ball screen action, right? Isaiah is just, that's when he's most comfortable, is when he can catch the ball and attack after someone else does something in a ball screen, right? He's played with Xavier Simpson his whole career. He's used to that. Mike Smith does a really good job of finding him and getting him involved. And if you go back and watch Isaiah's baskets last night, most of them came off of that kind of action where Mike would create penetration, get in a ball screen, and move the ball to Isaiah, hits a three. Like that's what he does. It's really an unfair weapon to have that good of a shooter. And I think Isaiah has expanded his scoring package this year. I think he's done more kind of in isolation, pulling up, backing guys down the paint. I do think he's improved as a passer. I just think what you tweeted last night about, like, he's a good free throw shooter, so he needs to get to the free throw line. I think that's kind of backwards. I think you want good people who are good at drawing fouls to get to the free throw line more, and that's never really going to be his game. If you look at his stats, he's shooting 44% from three. Why aren't you getting him 10 3-point attempts a game, right? Like, that's what I would look at more as where to expand kind of his offensive flow. When he drives into traffic, it hasn't really been a successful event, right? He's had a lot, like his worst moments offensively have been where he tries to do something with the ball and dribbles into five guys and turns it over. I don't think you need him to look for his drive more. I think he's got a good balance there. I think you need to look for him to just he's one of the best jump shooters in the country. Get him more jump shots. I mean, if you're getting him enough catch and shoot shots per game, you're going to win games. That's what he does.
I think it's totally fair. I also think that has shown the ability that he can, if he sees a lane, that he can drive. And sometimes his probably primary instinct, because of the player that he's been for most of his life, is probably when he gets to within a group of, sees contact coming, that he's looking to kick out or he's looking to make a pass. Like, if he just goes and draws contact, it's automatic free throws all game. I'm not saying that he needs to be driving the ball multiple times a game, but I'm saying if he has a window to go and draw contact, go draw contact. Like, he's shooting 95% at the free throw line. It's just as productive as him as a jump shooter. Obviously, three is more than two, but you get my point. If the ball's on the deck, and he has a center in front of him, go drive on him. Go try to finish. He tried to do it last night, nearly killed himself, but whatever. That's all I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with him trying to finish once or twice a game and make sure you get to the foul line a little bit. I'm not saying he needs to be trying to do this 8 times a game or 10 times a game, but he's a really good free throw shooter. It's actually going to be more in their favor if they ever get in some close games late where teams are going to be fouling. But all these blowouts, there hasn't even been a scenario where this is played out that you can actually really utilize his free throw shooting by getting him the ball when teams are intentionally fouling late in games. So that'll be a great thing to have in the pocket when the time comes. But
yeah, and it's not just him. It's Mike Smith, 83%, Franz Wagner, 84%, Eli Brooks, 93%. And none of those guys get to the line very much. And again, I would say most of them aren't particularly good at getting to the line. Like, I just think you have to separate the ability to make free throws with the ability to get fouled, right? And that's
I'm saying I think that Isaiah Livers can get fouled a couple times a game.
Well, he's never done.
Yeah, but at the same time, like we're both sitting here saying that he has expanded his game and that he can dribble a little bit. Like again, I'm not saying this needs to be like a high usage situation that this is now part of the game plan. I'm just saying like if he believes in himself to go finish and draw contact and play into something that like he can get points this way, he can score more.
I just think
saying.
Isaiah Livers has expanded his game. I think he's probably at the perfect amount of dribbling. I don't think you need to elevate that number anymore. Just as far as other guys who can do things with the ball on this team. Like if you have more dribbling available, would you want Franz Wagner handling the ball or Isaiah Livers?
You speak in these absolutes, Dylan, where you imagine that like I am suggesting that this become like
it is an absolute. There's only so many dribbles.
A primary option. I'm saying twice a game that if Isaiah has a window where he sees that he can go draw contact, there's nothing wrong with him going and drawing contact because he's one of the best free throw shooters in the country.
All right. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the country. I want him shooting more threes, and so
shoot threes. Okay. But if you have the ball if you put the ball on the deck when you see a lane, guess what you can't do? You can't take a three. So there's nothing wrong with him trying to draw contact.
I'm filing this take under the how are they going to get to 80 points preseason take. That's where this one is going in the same file. Isaiah Livers is
that's fine. That's fine. And I file your thing under it's just their numbers on a spreadsheet.
All right. That's fine.
We will always see the game different. I love you, buddy, but we'll always see the game a little bit differently. That's what makes the pod. That's what puts the charge call in the moving screen.
Like what Franz Wagner has shown with the ball over the last month is more dynamic, right? He can score for himself, but he's
a
much better passer. So why would you not want more of that? And with Isaiah standing in the corner.
I'm not saying I want less of anything.
All right. We'll move on. I'm just throwing it out there.
I'll be curious to hear what the people think. Okay. It's a bad take. If you say it's a bad take, Dylan, then it's definitely a bad take.
How's Joe Toussaint's season going?
Really well.
Oh, okay.
On the uptick.
Let's get into the power rankings. Should we do that?
Let's get into the power rankings.
I'm curious who you're gonna lead off with here.
Well, I'm completely unprepared as usual because you asked me to do this 15 minutes before recording today. So
I asked you to do it last night.
Let's see how it goes. No, I don't recall this.
Who wants the first pick?
You can have the first pick, Dylan.
All right, I will go with Michigan. I think that they are the best balance of offense and defense. They're got the best efficiency margin in the conference. I think it's close. I mean, it's really there's two teams at the top of the pile here right now based on how they play, but I'll take Michigan. We just talked about them for 30 minutes. Agree or disagree?
Right. Agree. For sure. Number 2, I think you right now, presently, I probably have to go with Iowa. Yeah. Right, they're still on a 5-game winning streak. Been not only that, but been playing well. Number 1 offense in the country, still number 1 offense in the league in conference only play. They're at 1.2 points per possession. But more importantly, the defense isn't a complete shit show as usual, and that right now is kind of the difference, right, between Iowa presently and Iowa years past. It's not a good defense, but it's also not this like massive burden that is dragging down, right, the otherwise good potential of a good team. Like they're effective, we'll say, defensively, as opposed to completely inept.
Yeah,
and that makes them. I think that makes them a real contender to win the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, for me, what makes them special is still that I just don't like their offense isn't just really good. It's special, and they it's just almost impossible to keep up with them, even if their defense isn't great, and that's been what sets them apart right now. They do so they're 7th in the Big Ten in defensive efficiency, which is they're right about league average. They haven't played a single offense in the top half of the league as far as in conference offensive efficiency, so that's a little scary for the defense is fixed take. but something to watch. I would also point out they're last in the Big Ten in 3-point rate allowed and in assisted field goal rate allowed. So those are pretty red light alarm issues with the defense. I don't think anyone wants to be last in those stats. So I'm not completely buying into what they're doing defensively, but I do really like Keegan Murray and what he's given them as sort of a different option as a stretch four who can be a really impactful defender and hit shots. And I think that maybe gives me a little hope that they'll actually get better as the year goes on defensively if he continues to play more. So that's my one positive about Iowa.
And it's the schedule. I mean, they're in league play. They haven't exactly gone against a bunch of offensive powerhouses.
Yeah,
right?
all bottom half offenses.
They're 7 games. It's Northwestern twice. It's Minnesota twice. It's Purdue. It's Rutgers. It's Northwestern. So, yeah, like this. What would you project Iowa finishes in league play in defense? 10th?
10th or 11th?
Yeah. So, it won't be what was it last year? 14th? 13th?
It was
12th. So yeah, it's slightly improved, right, from last year, but they're not winning games with their defense. The bigger question is if they can just manage to not lose games because of their defense.
I mean, you're going to have to shoot like 40% from three, period, to just stay in the game with them, right? So you have to be able to make open jumpers, and basically they just give teams open jumpers, and no one can make as many open jumpers as they make, and that's what sets them apart. Number 3 is an interesting one. Illinois still has by far the best efficiency numbers of everyone else, but I'm going to go with Purdue just because of how well they're playing and how many games they've played on the road. I mean, their schedule is just ridiculous, and I get that it's not the same going on the road, but they've played 6 or 7 road games already in the Big Ten out of their first 9 games. I've just never heard of anything like that. And like that Michigan State game changed everything for this team. And they took that momentum, and now they're win 4 in a row, and like they have momentum. I would point out the hesitation that they're really close to a kind of an even efficiency margin team, which means they're getting they're not blowing anyone out, right? They're barely beating teams, and you can say that's down to coaching and execution and everything else, but the big thing is just, I think this team is kind of just like last year's team. They're just ranked 87th in what Ken Pom calls luck, which is basically how you do in close games. And last year they were ranked 342nd. So they're winning close games now, and that makes you think they're a better team. But I do think they'll probably have some hiccups along the way. But right now we'll give them their props.
What do they have coming up?
Michigan, Minnesota, at Maryland, Northwestern, at Minnesota. So a really interesting spot against Michigan, but there's just they're good defensively, and then they just kind of 3-point variance with this team is insane. They shoot a bunch of threes, they allow a bunch of threes, and then you just see what happens on the accuracy, right? So do I think this is a contender? No, but I mean, we said Matt Painter's going to lose some games in December, and all of a sudden then a month later we're going to be like, oh, look at Purdue. So they're just tough. They're a pain in the ass to play against. They haven't really got blown out other than at Iowa. So they're just a classic bubble team for me.
It's pretty incredible that, we go back to that January 8th Michigan State game. They lose to Purdue, and it's, oh man, what does this mean for Michigan State? I can't believe they blew this game, blah, 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 blah. And we talked about how the second half of that game could really dictate weeks moving forward for Michigan State, right? And kind of the direction of the season when you have a half that swings like that. Well, it had the opposite effect for Purdue, right? Like they steal that game at Michigan State and then turn it into a 4-game winning streak. And now everyone's feeling completely different. You're ranking them 3rd in the league, that's just crazy how these things go.
Stole the game at Ohio State. So the problem is when you start stealing games left and right, it means you're going to start losing games. So that's the risk with Purdue.
That step back was nasty, though.
Yeah, but Jaden Ivey's going to be a good player. He's shooting 21% from 3 on the year. I mean, If you're
he
Ohio
made a
State,
Dwayne Washington 3 in Dwayne Washington's house.
what do you say if that goes in? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I just I don't trust Purdue, but I'm going to give them their credit for this podcast. Who do you got at number 4?
I would say it's hard. I did not expect to be picking between Illinois and Wisconsin here. I can tell you that much. I would say if Illinois, in a lot of ways, I'd probably take Illinois here. It's the opposite in a lot of ways of Purdue. They lost a 3-point game at Rutgers. They lost a 3-point game at home to Maryland. They lost a 6-point game to Ohio State. Going back even further, a 3-point loss to Missouri. Illinois is talent-wise and probably future bets-wise much better than its record, which is 10-5 right now, 6-3 in the league. But they're number 2 in the conference in offensive efficiency. They're number 2 in the league in defensive efficiency. This probably will end up, the pendulum will swing, I would think. And last year, how much did we talk about the games that Illinois pulled out of its ass because Iowa DeSumo making late shots and doing all kinds of crazy shit. And maybe their record wasn't quite as good as it was last year. And this year they are not going to win some of those games. So their record's not going to be quite as good as it should be. That's just kind of the way these things work. But Illinois still is a team that I think has very real Final Four aspirations to it. It might not win the league. It could still certainly win the league, but I would not. That's kind of a sleeping giant, whatever how you want to call it. But Illinois is still very much, I think, the team that we believed it could possibly be. It's just not winning games.
Illinois is the classic team that might not win the Big Ten, but you would pick to win the Big Ten tournament. We don't know if there will be one or whatever else, but they're outscoring teams by almost 14 points per 100 possessions in the Big Ten. That's almost double Ohio State and much closer to Michigan and Iowa, who are the teams that you all look at as the 2 at the top, right? So they, I think, on paper are the 3rd best team, but they have these losses that you just can't really comprehend. And teams go through that. I agree with what you said. They're a team that I like to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament more than a lot of other teams in the league. But I'm not sure. Last year, they were just the opposite. They were the team that won all these games, and Ken Pom numbers said they weren't that good. This team is that good. They're just losing games that don't make any sense. And and then you look a little closer, and maybe they haven't really won that many great games, but they're able to just blow out Minnesota at home. You have to be a good team to do that. So I feel like they're going to have a hot streak here. And they have a long time to prep for Iowa, and that'll be a huge game that could kind of spice up the Big Ten race in a hurry, right? They have 9 days off or 10 days off before that game. And then, if they don't beat Iowa at home, they're probably – no one's done as a contender, but they're in a lot of hurt there. Whereas if they win that game, all of a sudden the league race looks a lot more interesting.
And Illinois is the classic team that if you had a game canceled and they say, "Oh, don't worry, we made up your Illinois game," you're just like, "Oh, we're good. Thanks, though."
Right? But a lot of teams need that. You need a quality win. So you'd rather play them than
fair.
Nebraska, right? If you're a bubble team,
fair. That's fair.
That's who you want to get on your schedule.
All right. So you are at number, I should be writing this down. You're at number 5?
Yeah, number 5. And this is interesting. I'm going to go with, I guess I'll go with Wisconsin. The efficiency numbers aren't great. The game at Michigan was awful. They lost to Maryland at home. But I still think they probably get there in the end. I don't really think this team is anywhere near as good as we said before the year. I know you're probably going to beat your chest and say that you said that all along and they're going to miss all their threes and everything will go to shit. But
great takes over here.
I just feel like they haven't completely clicked as a team.
Yeah.
And they're still good. Are they going to get hot and go on a run? Probably. Their schedule coming up is pretty straightforward. It'll be interesting. I think that game at Rutgers is the sort of game that a team that is going to compete just figures out a way to win, right? So they're in the conversation still. They're not playing particularly great, and we'll see if that changes.
Are you a little disappointed in Micah Potter this year?
I guess I'm just disappointed in the whole situation that they have. Like, I think Nate Reavers is the real. He's been awful, and they're stuck kind of shuffling between these two guys. I mean, Potter's the offensive threat. Potter's shooting 55% on twos, 39% on threes. He's doing what you want. He's also just like playing bad defense for stretches and throwing fits going to the sidelines. But Reavers
scored over 12 points once.
How many times has he played over 30 minutes?
24. I mean, he plays 24 minutes a game in this stretch.
He needs to play 30 minutes.
Well, his defense is terrible, though.
It's not that bad. His defense is terrible when you play both of them together. Like, that's what they need to get away from. And
right.
Like,
so go back to last year.
I think you're already seeing Reavers' minutes ticking down, right? 19 minutes at Michigan, 17 minutes at Rutgers. I think you just need to play Micah Potter at the 5 because he's lost offensively, and Potter gives you so much there. That's what I think can make this team special.
Well, the good thing is maybe they'll make all their threes in the last month of the year again.
Not with Reavers out there. 1 of 11 in Big Ten games. That's not going to get it done.
No. Okay. You got anything else in Wisconsin?
No, I think they'll probably, when we do this in a couple of weeks, we'll be like, oh, Wisconsin's back. They've won a few games in a row, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that they're the 5th team in this league. Well, I don't think Purdue's the 3rd team in the league either. Like right now, you can say that, but they'll slip back, and a team like Wisconsin.
Purdue's playing the 3rd best in the league. That's what
I agree. I agree.
All right.
All right. So at 6, I will go with Ohio State. Just won at Illinois. Should have won last night. They would have been on a 4-game winning streak. You would have had them ranked 3rd in the league, right? If they'd won that game.
Potentially.
Yeah. So, like a lot of credit to Ohio State, the team that we just really didn't talk about, haven't really talked about. Top 5 in the league in both offense and defense. They are just kind of finding a way to play well. It's Chris Holtmann kind of doing his thing quietly. I wouldn't want to play this team. You know, I think they just kind of are a nuisance almost, where they don't look that good on paper, and then they're going to go and win 11 games in the league.
I might sell my stock in Ohio State here. They made 1 dunker layup in the entire game against Purdue. They shot 40% from 3, 14 of 35, and they lost at home to Purdue. Those are scary numbers. I get that they swept Rutgers, and the win at Illinois is great, but there's also not like there's some regression coming here, I think,
but they went 18 for 33 on 2s against Illinois, which has Kofi Coburn and some real size down there.
But they shot 52% from 3. So yeah, if they're gonna be this hot shooting 3-point team, they basically, if they make a bunch of threes, they're gonna win. But if they don't, I mean, Minnesota blown out, like they got swept by Purdue. They lost at Northwestern when they shot 20% from 3, and I just don't really trust them to going forward. I think they're gonna finish more middle of the pack than maybe you would think at this point, but maybe I'm wrong. They have a lot of guys. I'm not sure. I don't know. It doesn't jump out the page. And when you look closely, and their only wins are over Rutgers and Illinois, and Illinois just has inexplicable losses. Like, we can all agree on that. They lost to Maryland too. That doesn't mean Maryland's good. I don't know. I think I like Minnesota more than Ohio State long-term in the league. And that makes me uncomfortable.
I would disagree with that.
To side with Richard Pitino, but I just think that there's some signs there maybe, but we'll see. So you have anything else on Ohio State?
No, I was just going to say, like, I see what you're saying. Like, so if we have him sixth here, to me, like, moving forward, this is kind of where I see Ohio State probably finishing is like 6, 7. I certainly don't see them finishing lower than 8th. Just because I look behind them, and while I don't love Ohio State, I certainly don't love a lot of the teams behind them. The only teams that are behind them that I really see moving ahead would be Rutgers, maybe Minnesota.
No, Minnesota and Indiana. I think they're in the same tier with Minnesota and Indiana.
I am not buying Indiana at all. So we can take that off the
we'll
table.
get there, but I'm going with Minnesota next. So I want to talk about Minnesota.
So that's you got Minnesota at 7, right?
Yeah, and
okay.
Minnesota, you look at the numbers and you're like, okay, they're terrible on the road. They've been outscored by 2 points per 100 possessions in the Big Ten, but they've already played, at Illinois, at Wisconsin, at Michigan, and at Iowa.
Yes.
Done. They're done with that. They already played Michigan twice. They have one game against a contender left, which is Illinois. They've won big. They have nice wins. I think this team is going to kind of put together a bit of a run here, and I think they'll stand out against the Rutgers and the Purdues and those kind of teams in the league. I think they're actually seem like a better team than. And they've done all this despite shooting 29% from 3. Like, if they just make a few shots, they're going to have another level. I just like them moving forward in a way, and I think their results are a product of their schedule. And for some reason, they're just insanely good at home to an extreme degree for playing in an empty arena.
The best news for Minnesota is that it has 6 home games left and 5 road games left. But the thing that just gives me pause is, like, I know that they're all really good teams that they've lost to, right? No doubt. I'm not discounting that. I do get a little worried when you don't just lose, but you just get straight dusted in games. And that's been the case in pretty much all their losses. Their closest loss is 12 points to Wisconsin.
But what about the fact that they dust people at home? They dusted Michigan. They dusted Ohio State. They dusted Michigan
I don't know I have no idea what to make of that.
The only bottom half team they've played against is Michigan State. They haven't played Nebraska. They haven't played Maryland. So because they don't have any of those games, I think you have to adjust their numbers more than maybe some of the other teams in the league. They haven't played Rutgers. Like, I don't know. I think we'll see, but I like where Minnesota's at right now as a team.
I mean, I will say I'm fairly stunned that you're this optimistic about a team that's shooting under 30% on threes and is ranked dead last in the league in effective field goal percentage.
Wild times.
These are very wild times. Okay. So I am picking 8th. Is that right? I will take There's
no way you can take Rutgers here. I know you want to. They've been.
No, I will take Indiana. But I don't like them. I don't like how Indiana plays. They're of late they've lost to Purdue at home for the 7th time.
Archie Miller has never beaten Purdue.
Like,
insane.
Yeah, I mean, like that game to me just speaks so much to. Losing that game speaks so much to this team, that program, that you have Purdue come into your home court on a game where everyone's like, they got to win this game. And it just looked terrible again. Sell me in any way on Indiana, even though I'm the one that just picked them 8th.
I think they'll miserably come to a record close to 500. Teams are shooting 40% from 3 against them. That probably won't last. But they've already, you talk about, they haven't really been blown out except that Purdue game. They've played 3 overtime games. They've been competitive basically every time, and they can make a game miserable and grind it out, right? So that's kind of like the best thing you're hoping for. They can't really shoot, but they have Trace Jackson Davis, who's an incredible player in his own right. I think he just figures out a way to get a couple of these wins, and they get to 9 wins in the league, something like that.
You've seen the rest of their schedule, right?
Yeah, but like
They got Iowa twice, Michigan twice, Illinois at home. They have your boys at Minnesota.
at home, though.
They got Ohio State. They got Purdue on the road. I don't know, man. I think this is a under 500 team by probably more than one game.
They have Rutgers twice. There's games they can win on the schedule. I mean, I think they can be competitive in every game. I think they'll probably have bad losses and probably a couple good wins in there. What game they must have some postponed game too. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not saying they're a great team, but they're better than Rutgers, who has been horrific. There's no other good teams left in the league really right now. So I don't know where you go from that.
I feel like Rutgers has a better, like, I'm not discounting the fact that Rutgers has looked like shit basically this entire month. But I think long term, between now and the first week of March, I think Rutgers has a much better chance of figuring out how to win games and correct what's been some really poor play than Indiana does.
All right. I don't see it. I'm taking Michigan State 9th, basically because they haven't played, and Rutgers and Northwestern and Maryland and Penn State and Nebraska are either losing or not playing. Michigan State beat Rutgers and, I mean, should have won that Purdue game. I think they kind of got back on track a bit, right? So it's more an indictment of everything behind them than them being a great team. But who are you going to pick above Michigan State in this spot?
That's fair. So at 10, it's either Northwestern or Rutgers here, which is both teams are on 5-game losing streaks, I think.
Neither team has won a game in 2021.
Not good, not great. But like Northwestern, their losses, it's 2 losses to Iowa, a loss to Michigan, a loss to Illinois, and a loss at Ohio State. They were reasonable underdogs and they lost all those games. But I will say, based on, Rutgers still does have a win over Illinois. It feels like a million years ago, but
you were going to say a month ago, and it was a month ago.
Yeah. It beat Purdue. So, I will take Rutgers here. They need to get some wins though. They have upcoming games against Penn State, Indiana, Michigan State, Northwestern, Minnesota. They need to find a way, I feel like, to go, 2 or 3 wins minimum here in this stretch. If they have any chance of finishing in that 500 range and getting an NCAA bid, right?
Yeah, I mean, this feels like the season goes off the rails to me. This is Penn State is not as bad as their record is, and Indiana is not as they're both two teams that are desperate to win. I think they could go 0-2.
As bad as its record is.
I don't like anything about this team. The things I liked about the team early in the year are just basically gone. They're not playing defense. They're 10th in the league in defense. They shoot 55% at the free throw line. I mean, it's embarrassing how bad this team is at the free throw line. You can't win like that. They were really hot from 3 early. Now they don't shoot threes. They shoot the fewest threes in the Big Ten. What is there to like? If you look closer, I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, I think. Early in the year, their offense looked good because they were getting a bunch of transition and just kind of running teams out of the gym. That's gone. You're not going to get that in the Big Ten to any degree to change a game unless you're playing Nebraska. If you can't get stops, you can't play in transition. They're second to last in defensive rebounding in the Big Ten. Like, these are things that Rutgers used to be good at, and now they're just not. What is there to like? Like, Ron Harper, he's going to only – I don't really see his shooting being sustainable to carry the whole team. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't see it.
No, I mean, you have to hope at this point that at some point it is, okay, everyone probably got a lot of good feelings about the team's shooting ability and maybe started to think of Rutgers as being a little bit different than what it actually is. And you need to get back to what they did last year. And it needs to be defense and rebounding first. And that's the hope, I would say. But because they're not playing like what we know Rutgers to be. And, Steve Peichel turned this program around a very certain way, and it wasn't an influx of offensive talent. So, they got to get back to that. And I think it being mid-January, there's still a chance that happens.
It is mostly the same guys on the court, and they've dropped from 6th to 37th in adjusted defensive efficiency. It just feels like one of those situations where we talk about a lot, where you have a bubble team that hasn't made a tournament in a long time, brings everyone back. They weren't actually that good. Maybe they won a few more games than their record. I mean, this team was 10th in offense in the Big Ten last year. And then regression hits you real quick where, oh, man, we really got – I just don't know. Obviously the schedule was tough, whatever else, but this thing could just go south really quickly, I think. I mean, if they drop to 3-7 in the Big Ten, I don't know they can get back from that.
It's over. Yeah. Last year they finished second in the league in defense in conference games, held teams to 31% 3-point shooting, 45% 2-point shooting. That's how Rutgers wins. It's not making threes. That ain't happening. So stop trying to be something you're not. And they need to re-identify how they got to where they were last year. I do think Steve Peichel can do that. I think this message can be translated, right? And being on a 4-game losing streak makes the language pretty clear. So that's it. But I do think there's a chance. If I had to bet right, all right. Do you want to make a little wager here?
Well,
who finishes higher in the league standings, Rutgers or Indiana?
Indiana.
Okay, I will take Rutgers.
All right.
Will you be in Indy to cash in on this bet?
We'll see.
Or Chicago, or where are we going? I don't know.
We don't know where we're going. That's the mystery. All right, where are we at? So we're at 10, 11. We're at 11th. I guess I will take.
I like when it starts with I guess.
I really want to take Penn State, but I'm going to go with Northwestern. This team's not good. The defense, they found some things offensively early, but the defense is just getting shredded in the Big Ten. Last in effective field goal percentage, last in block rate, 1.4 points per possession allowed. I mean, they've played good teams, but I think what happened early in the year was just kind of a flash in the pan, and I don't really see this getting back on track. There's just not enough size or talent. I mean, they haven't played against Michigan yet. They haven't played, I don't know. Or I guess they played Michigan once, but they played Michigan again, Illinois again, Wisconsin. I don't see it. Wisconsin twice.
Yeah, I mean, it's credit for them trying to change and do things, and they got some wins early, but, as we were talking about, playing faster and all that stuff. But if you're playing faster against better teams, they're just going to run you. So, and that's what has happened. They gave up 87 to Iowa, 85 to Michigan, 81 to Illinois, 81 to Ohio State, 96 to Iowa. So, that's great. Play differently, but the talent gap is still vast. So
I wouldn't be surprised to see Penn State finish ahead of Northwestern.
Nor would I. I would go with that. At 12, I'll take Penn State.
Back in action. Barry took a nice fine. You see that?
Good for him, right?
Yeah. Criticizing the
officials. I didn't even see what he did. He was just yelling.
I don't know the specifics. I just got the
Can
public reprimand
Big Ten
in my
officiating?
What do you have to say about it? Do you like the
really quick with the tees this year? It seems
empty
gym. Is it just
man.
an empty gym? Yeah.
How did Michigan get a technical last night on a play where Maryland was assessed 2 technicals?
I still have no idea. There's been no explanation.
That was just crazy to me. but they quick with the tees, empty gym. It makes sense in a way that they would be overbearing with technical fouls. So Penn State, one thing, they're last in the Big Ten in getting to the free throw line and last in allowing teams to get to the free throw line. So just getting destroyed at the free throw line because they play this bullshit defense where they just try to force turnovers and foul all the time. On offense, they shoot more off the dribble jumpers than any team in the country. I don't really like any of this, but I do feel like the way they have all these guards, they'll get hot in a couple games and cause someone problems that doesn't really want that problem. It was almost a Michigan game, to be honest.
Yep. They'll steal some games. Not a lot, but some. I think they probably have one of the weakest remaining schedules in the league too. So
it's also hard to figure out. Like they probably have. There's games that aren't on their schedule yet that need to be made up. It's the whole thing, right? Like Michigan, they have to play again, but it's not on their KenPom page, so I get confused. I will admit that I have a hard time keeping track of all these postponed games. 13, Maryland. How weird is it that they have wins over two of the top teams? It's strange. I think they're just gonna.
I completely missed the fact that they randomly played a D2 school on Friday.
Yeah, they lost. They did it to after a game got postponed. They were supposed to play. I don't know who, but they didn't want to go 9 days without a game, so they just threw it on there. To get a run. I
completely missed that. I have no idea how, but.
Well, it was a game against Wingate at noon, probably on some streaming service. I'm not shocked that you missed it, but it makes sense. They had the extra spot in their schedule and just wanted to get to stay fresh, I guess. It really paid off at Michigan on last night.
Wingate University is in, I always love doing this, Wingate, North Carolina. It looks like it's right by Charlotte. How about that? D2 school? Any notable alumni? No.
Content people need.
All right. That leaves Nebraska, which are we have no idea. Are they going to play again?
Yeah.
No. That's the biggest question with Nebraska.
Bad COVID situation, it sounds like.
Really bad.
And what's the motivation?
Exactly. And you have a coach with prior health conditions who currently has COVID-19. And that's serious, serious stuff. So positive vibes going to Fred Hoiberg. But yeah, that's a bad situation. They've played one game since January 2nd and are still amid a pretty serious shutdown. So their next game is January 30th against Penn State. We'll see if that game is played. But yeah, I mean, between the games that they've already missed and the games that are going to be future that they'll probably miss in the future, who know? Like right now, they're projected to go 2-13 in the league on KenPom, so that's 5 games short, and it'll probably be fewer than that. Would be my guess. I don't know. Risk versus reward is.
The press release said like 7 guys on the tier 1 personnel or something have tested positive. It was a little unclear, but
wasn't it like 12 tier 1 personnel, but 7 players and Fred Hoiberg? I think it was that.
Yes. So that's a full on outbreak.
Yes.
And like this season is it's ending on when like there's no real aspirations of where you're going here with this. I don't know what you do. And that's only going to become more prevalent as the season goes on, right? What do these teams do that are playing for basically nothing? What's really their incentive? And to the Big Ten's credit, most of the games between good teams are in March and late February. So I think that was almost done on purpose. Like there's a reason that Michigan hasn't played Illinois or Iowa, because there's a good chance those teams are still going to want to play and you're going to be able to fulfill your nice TV slots at that point in the year. So you have to wonder about some of that too. It's going to be really interesting how this all plays out over the next 2 months. I think we'll see some things we probably haven't really ever seen before. Wouldn't think would be possible, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have anything else before getting out of here?
No, let's wrap it up.
Anything you
Hopefully we didn't have
on
any terrible picks. And I do like how you always want to just plug things after people listen to the podcast.
Usually I do it up front, but I always feel bad kind of dragging it out in the beginning. No one wants to hear that. Anyone who's listening now is pretty much on board, right?
Let's hope. So yeah, we got all sorts of good content on Hoops. You should check it out. What do you have over at The Athletic?
Oh, I have wrote about Isaiah Livers today, like we talked about. Wrote a review of the Tiger Woods doc, if anyone's interested in that. Wrote a piece.
Thumbs up or thumbs down? What's your grading scale?
Thumbs up.
All right,
I thought
check it out.
I thought it was a very like Mark Steinberg came out and said it was really salacious and all this stuff, and I'm like, I thought it humanized him more than most things that we've seen, and it, outside of the kind of flowery, outside of reality pieces that have been produced about Tiger that just don't mention the major parts of his bio. I thought it was good. But yeah, check that piece out on The Athletic if you're interested. Also have a story on the state of Michigan State's season and what's going to happen. So check that out as well. Subscribe to both sites, subscribe to this podcast, and tip your bartenders and servers whenever you can. See ya.